Welcome to Living Ardently. I'm your host, Adrienne Garalde, and we are back with another episode. I don't know what day it is when this is coming out, but whatever day it is, I hope you're having a great day. We have a great guest, and we have some good conversations. And for guys, if you're looking for some love advice, today's the day. This is the episode you need to listen to. All right, y'all. We're here with my friend, so we'll introduce him once we get back. So yeah, let's get into it. So today's guest was an active duty infantry officer in the Army for 4 years. He's recently engaged. He was actually a convert at the age of 13. He is the host of the podcast Seeking Excellence. You can follow him at Seeking365, which is not the name of the podcast, but it's the name of his Instagram. And you can follow him at ncrank23, and that's for Jordan. Welcome, my guest, Nathan Crankfield.
My man, I appreciate it. It's great to be here with you today, man.
Yeah, bro, appreciate that. We're really excited to have you. It was great. We did this is like a two-parter. We talked about relationships between the bros at your through Seeking Excellence, and now we're talking about the ladies. The homies and the ladies, you know what I mean?
That's right.
So, for those who might not know you right away, I want you to give us a little bit of your backstory, your testimony, real quick, just to introduce everyone to who you are and stuff like that.
Sure, absolutely. You can hear the basketball being dribbled by my apartment and the noises of the college dorm. It's a good segue into my background, but I was born and raised in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I was baptized Lutheran. My dad was Baptist, and I went to Methodist preschool, and then I started Catholic school in kindergarten. And so I always say, like, I'd seen all the Christianity world by the time I was 5. Yeah. And when I was 13, I became the first Catholic in both sides of my family, and decided to convert. 4 or 5 years later, I was able to be my mom's confirmation sponsor, which was awesome.
Oh, wow.
And then I went on to Mount St. Mary's University, where, like you said, I got an Army ROTC scholarship, and so I went active duty at the end of those 4 years, became an infantry officer, went down to Fort Benning, Georgia, and did my airborne school, infantry school, ranger school, and then I moved up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina in Fayetteville, and served in the 82nd Airborne Division. Drove by J. Cole's house while I was there, of course. You got to go sightseeing. And then I went to Afghanistan in 2017 with them on a combat deployment for 6 months. Came back, got out of the Army in 2019, worked for Dynamic Catholic for a year. Mm-hmm. And once that was up, got into a relationship with a nice young lady right around the end of that. Yeah. Things started working out. My time at DC was over, and this job here at Benedictine College to be a resident director opened up. Around the same time that I moved is when I started Seeking Excellence. We founded the blog and podcast, and we've been doing events and stuff last spring, and that's been awesome as well. And then we're moving to Denver. Me and my fiance, recently engaged, as you said, we're moving to Denver in probably a month after this comes out. So early June is what we're looking at. So yeah, and I'll be starting at Augustine Institute in the fall.
That's so great. You're going to be studying to get your master's, right?
Correct, in theology, and hopefully working at AI. But hopefully by the time this comes out, I don't know if I have a job or not. We'll see, man.
Fingers crossed. We're praying for you. We're praying for that. So definitely you talked about Seeking Excellence a little bit there. Give us a little bit of history of Seeking Excellence. You said you started a year ago. You're coming around 1 year, if not already 1 year by the time this drops. So what was the original goal, Seeking Excellence, and how has it changed, if it has changed at all, or how's it developed since?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I actually just reminisced on a podcast a couple of days ago about this. Yeah. And it's always so fun, just like when we talked on my podcast about living ardently, it's just cool to think back, of where things kind of began. And so last April, we actually started doing this Life After Lent series on Zoom. It was when everything was still Zoom. Nobody hated Zoom yet, right? We were all kind of we're getting there, but nobody was fully cursing Zoom yet. And it was okay because it was normal, right? And so we started doing these webinar series, and I would have a priest and a girl on with myself, and we would talk about a topic. Yeah. And we would drink. So we call them holy happy hours. And so we do a different topic and just kind of discuss it. I'd be smashing bourbon, like just living my dream, right? Living my best life. And so we had homies. I think I can't remember. I'm trying to remember if you've had any of these girls on the podcast, but we had like Michaela Robinson, the artist formerly known as Michaela Rogers, was on. Caroline Owens, and so it was awesome. And just different priests, and then eventually I had Emily on. So my sixth one, Emily Harpole came on, and that's where things began for us. And so that was kind of the start. And then in the midst of those, we created the website so we could host kind of like for our blogs, because I've been writing blogs basically all year, but didn't really have a website to put them on. And so then we started the blog and website, and then we kind of revamped everything in August. So I kind of consider August our real founding date, because that's when we became a nonprofit. It's when the podcast launched. It's when our brand and new logos and stuff came out, and we like established our team. So that was really like August 22nd is what I kind of consider our founding. But everything like the shadow founding, like the beginning stages were definitely about a year ago in April. And so it's been cool watching it just kind of evolve and change and stuff over time and just kind of grow, and just trying to really just in the laying of the foundation stage right now, and hoping that the podcast will continue to grow. That's one of our main efforts, the blog. And we really want to get to a place where we're providing coaching services, community stuff, and content for people to go through on their own that will help train people in what we call the 7 pillars of excellence: mental, emotional, physical, financial, professional, social, and spiritual. So that people can be formed in those 7 areas, awesome. Obviously spiritual, but in the other areas through the lens of their faith, and realize how their faith impacts those areas and how those areas of your life impact your faith, so that people can stop being pulled away from the Lord for the sake of a toxic relationship, or for bad mental health, or for bad physical issues that could be prevented, and like all these different areas, or crazy social ideas and ways that we approach, a lot of people fall into secular ideas and things like that because of social issues, we think. So just trying to keep people on the path that the Lord set them on, teach them how to strive for excellence spiritually, but also shore up those other areas in their life which are very prone to drawing people away from God. Yeah,
it's so true. There's so much in this world that is great, right, in nature, because God created it, right? But there's also so much that those things can also be used, just like anything, for against us, to take us away from the goodness that we were created to be. And I love that mission that you guys carry out.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's something that's so interesting, because I've read and I read a lot of self-help, personal growth books, and even a lot of Catholics who dabble in that arena, right? Like we always want to try to boil it down. So the simplest way to say it is your mind, body, and spirit, and people will tell you to be a good steward of those 3 things. And I think that's 100% true. But I think the reality of it is that it doesn't end there, right? And what we're going to get into today with being future fathers, hopefully, and husbands for sure, thinking about that, right? That you can't just, I think that, and a lot of times in business, you want to say, okay, we're going to focus on these 3 things, and this is going to be the 3 things we're going to do, and we're going to do them really well. Right. Well, that doesn't necessarily transition well into your personal life, because if I say I'm going to crush my fitness, I'm going to crush my spiritual life, and I'm going to crush mental health, right? Those are going to be my 3 things. Right. Well, what about my relationships? What about your money, right? What about you're a citizen of a country, of a place like it, right? And then locally, what are you doing in helping those problems, right? There's you can't just neglect it, right? What about your emotional intelligence, your emotional growth, your emotional health? You know what I'm saying? And so what about your job? You have a profession, right? There's too much. You can't afford to do that, right? It's kind of like being a parent. I can't just say, well, as a parent, I'm going to coach sports. I'm going to do that really well. I'm going to cook dinner every night really well. And I'm going to clean. It's well, are you going to spend time with your kid, right? Are they going to be educated? You can't just pick 3 things, right? Unfortunately, life is more complex than that. And so we have to be stewards of all these areas. And so I love the goodness, I think, in people's hearts when they try to boil it down and make it simple. We want to make it simple on striving for excellence in those areas, but we still have to admit that this is what we have to be stewards of. You can't just make up this reality where we don't have to take care of those other things.
Right. It's so important. It's just like you said, there's so much layers to it. What was the line from Shrek? There's so many layers.
Oh, onions have layers.
Yeah.
Ogres have layers.
Ogres have layers.
Exactly. Cakes have layers. Ogres are not like cakes.
So, so today's episode, like I said, this is Nate. This is the way the episode is gonna be. I mean, we're gonna just have fun with it.
Yeah, I could have kept going there. I was gonna get into the parfaits. Everybody loved parfaits, but I figured I'd stop by Eddie Murphy impressions while we were ahead. I love Shrek.
Oh man, it got so popular recently. Shrek.
Yeah, it's making a bit of a comeback. I keep seeing it on like cable TV, and we watch it every time. Emily and I.
I feel like it started because
when I have
memes.
the remote. She never puts it on. to be clear, there's one person in our relationship has ever turned on Shrek.
So you got Emily hostage whenever you put that on.
It's me.
I got you.
Yeah,
it's you. Speaking of Emily, so we're talking today. Like we said, we did the episode. In your episode, we talked about the bros. Today we're talking about the ladies. So let's start there. How did you meet Emily?
Yeah, dude. So like I kind of said, we did the whole Holy Happy Hour thing, right? So the craziest part, what's really fun, I think, is that we when I sent out my the invite, it had like this like flyer, this image that had me, Michaela Rogers, and Father Michael Caraway down in Louisiana. Just our faces, the time, like is on Zoom, right? And this is before we had NASC stuff on it. I sent it to like 250 people on Instagram, right? Like anybody that I found that I knew was Catholic, that was young, on Instagram, I sent it to them, right? Like I was just messaging people, bro, like every day for like 5 days when I wasn't working, when I was just shamming off on the couch. This is what I was doing. I was watching The Office and sending this image to people. And that was my week of April 16th last year. And she was just one of them, right? Like, didn't think anything of it, like just sent it to her at the time. And then, and so she was like, oh, like, I don't think I can make it. Maybe if you have more in the future or whatever. She's like, I'm actually doing a Facebook Live event that night. And so she was working for the Culture Project at the time. So they had transitioned into doing live events like almost every day on Facebook and YouTube and stuff. Yeah. And so she had an event and I was like, oh, check it out. Like, send me the link. And so I watched hers, and then I had like a running list of women to like think about asking to be on the Holy Happy Hours with me. And Caroline Rose Owens was the next week, and she runs the She Believed podcast. Yeah. And I was like, let me listen to her podcast, because I'd never met really any of these women in person. I have met all of them now, which is ironic and fun. All of them like multiple times, but hadn't met any of the girls at the time. But so I was like, let me listen to Caroline's podcast just to kind of get a feel for who she is and all this stuff. And Emily was the guest on her podcast that week. And so I listened to that. I watched her Facebook Live event. Watching the Facebook Live event, I was like, she's not hard on the eyes. You know what I'm saying? I was like, she's a pretty good looking young lady. So then I'm like, okay, and she's fire on the podcast. And so I was like, man, I should do one with her. Holy Happy Hour. And so then I'm like, okay, invite her to do a Holy Happy Hour. She's like, sure, that would be great. I'd love to do that. And so we pick a time and a date to do it, which was awesome. And then we Zoom, right? So like this is 5 weeks after the first time I messaged her. We're actually doing our Holy Happy Hour finally comes around. Yeah. And we Zoom to like get to know each other. I would do this with all the girls, like Zoom, phone call, whatever, just to kind of get to know them and prep for the event. And we ended up Zooming for like 3 hours. Whoa. And so we just talked for 3 hours. It was awesome. And then at the end of that, this is step one. Step one of the advice, the first nugget I'm going to drop, that this is like what set me up for success for the next however long I live, basically, is I clarified my intentions at the end of that call, right? And I had to do this with a lot of the girls that I was doing these events with, right? Just because we were talking so much and things like that. But I told her, I was like, hey, like I usually do these calls with people and stuff, but it's usually not this long. And like, I really like you. I really enjoy talking to you, and I think we should like kind of stay focused on doing the event coming up, but I'd be interested, to continue talking about and seeing like if there's anything here, like for a relationship and stuff. And so she loved that, super grateful, right? Like so appreciative. And we were both just kind of transparent and honest about where we're at, what we felt, and all that stuff. Yeah. And so, so that was really important. And then we did an Instagram Live like 2 days later to promote the event, which is one of the funniest things to look back on because it's still up on my page. And this is like pre-dating. We hadn't met in person yet, right? But we're like flirting with each other at this point, but like not trying to be like obviously flirting with each other and stuff. You know what I mean? So I'm like trying to make her as uncomfortable as possible. and I was pretty successful. And then a couple of days later, we do the Holy Happy Hour with, get this, Father Jonathan Meyer out in Indiana, who's probably going to be saying our wedding, which is really exciting. Yeah. And
That's
so,
crazy.
yeah, he's my man. He's on our board of directors, and he's just an awesome guy. And so then I was at the time working for Dynamic Catholic, and I would travel to Kansas City every month for work.
Yeah.
Stopped during the pandemic, but I was pushing to go back in June because Emily moved to Kansas at the beginning of June, like mid-June.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, my boss, I'm like, I just really got to get back on the road, man. Like I got to go see my parishes. I'm selling it, right? I'm just like, I got to go see my parishes, like I didn't get to go to Kansas City in March, but I went to Texas in March. So I really got to go to KC. I owe them a visit. And so he approves. And so I fly out to Kansas, and that was where we got to meet in person finally at like 10 p.m. on a Monday. I'd been up for like 18 hours, I think, by that point. And I drive out here to Atchison, Kansas, and we go to the dive bar in town, the college dive bar in town in the off season. So it was just delightful. What you would consider a picture perfect first date, if you're a lady out there who's hoping to meet your future husband, this was just high quality first date stuff. But we had a good time, and that was kind of the foundings and the beginnings. But it all began with the sliding in the DMs. I know we're both very pro Instagram because of our tales. But
it's true. That's awesome. I love that. I did before we started talking about it. I think it was on your podcast, or maybe before we recorded last week. I was like, you told me this. I'm like, dang, really? You also met on Instagram? That's awesome.
It was wild to connect that.
It was so great because for those of you who don't know, I also met my fiance. Well, by the time you're listening to this, we are going to be married.
That's right.
So we're recording this like
9
mid-April. Yeah, we're mid-April right now. I'm getting married on April 23rd. By the time this release is probably going to be in May. So yeah, it's we're married now. I don't know what it's like yet. But future Adrienne and future episodes will be able to tell you that.
That's right. That'll be awesome, man.
I'm excited. But I met my future wife through Instagram too. Technically, we met in person at her sister's wedding when I was in college. Her sister and I went to the same college, and then she was like the maid of honor. She gave a speech. I thought she was cute, but I also thought she was married. Because her sister, who I went to school with, was the youngest of all of her siblings. So I was like, she's probably married, So I was like, all right, whatever. But I mean, didn't really think of anything about it. A funny thing is, she came up to me at that wedding. I used to have this like YouTube channel, well, I still do, of like really like embarrassing videos that I used to do, and then like some that I did on purpose that I thought were funny at the time. But I never met anybody who I didn't want to see that. See it until that day. She came up to me and she had mentioned it, and I promise you, I probably blocked this memory out because I don't remember it until she had mentioned it.
That's hilarious.
Because she had mentioned that she's like, hey, you're Adrienne, like I've seen your videos on YouTube, and I go ha ha ha, like an awkward laugh, and then that was it. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything else. Like, I'm just like now thinking, what videos have she seen? What like embarrassing moments? So that was it.
All the thoughts are just running through your mind.
Yeah, that was the end of our conversation, I think.
But you made it past that, which is huge.
We made it past it.
It's no easy feat.
Right. And then fast forward, I'm doing the Mile Day May through the Living Person. I always attribute the fact that I re-met Sarah through the Living Person. I was like, Jarrell, you're creating a dating service.
He's an assist. He's an assist master. Magic Johnson.
Yeah. He gave me that assist, and I'll leave that back in.
That's right.
So that's awesome. He was sharing my story when I was doing the Mile Day in May challenge, like about a couple years ago, and Sarah was following the account, noticed. She's like, oh yeah, that's Adrienne. That's my sister's friend, and she followed me, and I followed her back. And then what she did, like we would just like, respond to each other's stories and stuff. Really didn't think much of it until one day she had complimented my podcast. I was like maybe 5 to 8 episodes in, maybe, you know, and she had complimented it.
Early days.
Yeah. And she was saying like, you know, I really like your podcast, and it's everything that you've been saying is super relatable. And I was like, just want to let you know. And I was like, oh, same thing, you know, same approach of our first communication for a while. It was like your first time was telling me that she had watched something that I didn't want her to watch, or I didn't expect somebody to watch. But now she's listening to something I actually care for, and she's complimenting it. I'm like, oh, wow. You know, I had a different reaction there.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa. And so we just...
Something you're proud of.
Yeah. And we just start like DMing each other. Like we just start messaging, and I start bouncing off ideas to her on Instagram. And that's just kind of how the conversation went. Granted, I didn't ask for her number or ask her on a date until I saw her in person, just because I don't know. I just didn't like that. I didn't want to ask for your number through Instagram. Like if I want to ask for your number, I'm going to ask for a number in person. So I was trying to find a way to like get her to like find a way to meet her in person, because we live about an hour and a half away from each other. So it's not like easy.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a hard like workaround to try to make that happen. But we were just like, I was just trying to figure that out. I couldn't go to her church on weekends because I had to work weekends at my church and things like that. So it was kind of hard, but we found a way. Yeah, I mean, youth ministry life. Eventually we found a way. Her sister actually was the way. Her sister came down to visit. Hey, like
the assist.
Again with the assist.
Another assist.
I'm like I got
You're
Magic
Johnson
Johnson everywhere. Right, I'm just finishing, you know what I mean? So,
that's right.
You know, she came down to visit and was like, hey, like I am going to be in town. And I was like, since when? Like, I mean, I love Teresa, but since when am I important enough to come down and see me in person when you're in town? Like, I don't know. Like, it just didn't seem like right. So I was like, maybe she is interested, because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if Sarah was interested in me. I was interested in her. I just didn't want to, like, you know, let that heartbreak happen yet, because I wasn't sure. You can't tell through DMs. I mean, like, you can start it, right?
Right, sure.
Actually, it happened. We meet in person at Disney Springs. She's the one who actually makes the move to get my number, even though like it was my idea to get her number that night, to ask her on a date. Yeah, Sarah knew what she wanted.
Sarah's not afraid of some offense, I'm seeing here.
Oh no, she is not. She likes some offense too. So she took a picture of me and her nephew, and then was like gonna send me the photos.
Oh, the classic.
The classic. You feel that? Yeah.
The classic move. Let me send you this. What's your number?
So I got a picture of our group, and I was like, at the end of the night, I was gonna go and ask for the numbers. Like, hey, let me get your number? I'll send you the photos that we took from like the official Disney photographer.
Right.
And but she stole it. She like undercut me, and she got my number that way. And long story short, that's how it happened. Eventually, we went on a date. I actually wanted to ask her, like I was going to ask her to go to this like Young Catholic Professionals event, and she was going to go, but she got sick that day. So I was like, man, I'm not going to wait another time for us to meet again. So I'm just going to I shot my text. I was like, hey, look, like I want you to know that I'm interested in you, and I don't want to wait anymore. I've been waiting to ask you in person, but I would like to take you on a date if that's something you're interested in. And she was like, yes. I was like, yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's kind of how that all started, and you know now we're getting married, or are married at this point, and you know I love that. So guys, if the girl's gonna play a little offense, it's okay. Let it happen.
That's right.
You never know, and don't be afraid to let to finish an assist as well. That's just kind of my advice. If God's giving you assists. Yeah, if God's giving you assists, you know, follow through with them.
Take it.
Right.
Absolutely.
So we will move a little bit forward here and like kind of like dive a little bit deeper. So what in your relationships, right? Like now we're dating, our significant others. What you know, what standards, like how have you guys formed your relationship with Emily? How has that formed, and what standards have you kind of kept up to kind of live out a life of virtue as a couple? How has that looked?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, you know, one thing that I think is important for people to realize is I think a lot of times we treat our significant others, or we take the same approach to our significant others that we try to take towards God, where we want to make, we try to make God into what we want him to be. Right, instead of like accessing of what God really is, and like what we, or even like our best, to quote Matthew Kelly, the best version of ourselves. Right, we think about our best version of ourselves. We kind of try to look at what we are now instead of like trying to actually think of what's my ideal and then pursuing that. We try to we get into this complacency of being like, well, I'm pretty good, right? Like everybody in the world tell you they're a good person, right? Like there's people on death row who always walk up to and they even say I never did anything wrong. I'm a good person. You know what I mean? Like no remorse, no nothing. And it's like, okay, that's what I think a lot of people do in their relationships is they approach it and they say they get into a relationship with somebody and then that person becomes their ideal. Instead of creating your ideal and then saying, this is what I'm looking for, right? And so I was blessed, I think, a lot in Seek 2015. One of my favorite things is Emily's boss, Sarah Swafford, once gave me this idea through her talks and in her book to create a list.
Emotional virtue?
What are you actually... Yeah, emotional virtue, bro. Emotional virtue. Check it out at emotionalvirtueministries.com. Emotionalvirtue.com, whatever it is. Google Sarah Swafford. But, or message Emily for a book. That's so funny. But I created a list, man. I actually just pulled it up. Yeah. So I was like, I want to give some examples from it. Yeah. But I created a list. And I think this all came from her of creating 3 different lists. One is must-haves. One is can't-haves, and then one's like a nice-to-have kind of list, right? And it's so important to have those things, I think, to have some idea of what it is that you want, what you're looking for. And so the first thing that I put was holy. God's the most important thing in her life. Intelligent, love for the church and her teaching, reason and common sense, virtue, maturity, humility, independent, joyful, emotionally strong, mentally strong, confident. That was a big one for me. Like, obviously, everybody's like self-conscious and stuff at times, but like Emily's pretty confident. I mean, confident to go out. She's not somebody who feels like she has to wear makeup all the time. She's not somebody who, is constantly self-conscious about her body or, all these different things, which, everybody deals with that at times. I deal with that at times. She deals with it at times. But I wanted somebody who was going to be more confident so we could go out. One of my main things that I was looking for overall was somebody who I could take on the world with and really be get after it with. And so if we're constantly trying to shore up all these things that I think are much better taken care of before marriage, it doesn't mean you can't grow together and you're not going to get better, obviously, and get stronger in all these areas. Right. But there's like kind of a threshold where you have to think about like, what's kind of my minimums, not to say that anybody who's a straight hot mess is unlovable or that they shouldn't be in relationships with other people. But I think there's a certain level of like together, like having your ish together before you start dating somebody for the sake of marriage, right? Right. That you should have. That's my personal belief. And so then desire for purity was one of them. Supportive and encouraging, personable, organized, flexible. You know what I mean? Just like adaptable and things like that. I thought was really big. Then I had like my can't haves is like, I'm not marrying anybody who smokes cigarettes, temptations to lust, poor moral judgment, needy, jealous, hateful, spiteful, mean-hearted. And then like the nice to haves were kind of like sports fan. Like I can watch sports with her, which Emily loves her some baseball especially, but likes watching sports in general. Loves exercise is one of my nice to haves. Is funny, has good friends, evangelizes, things like that, right? Likes to cook, knows how to cook. And so what's crazy, Emily and I both did this. Obviously, Emily working for Sarah Swafford had done this. But it was really cool for both of us how we kind of thought, like in the first like month of talking, because we did like a lot of Zoom, FaceTime, Marco Polo, texting, obviously. We really felt like, wow, this person's like my list. Like I was like, Emily is like my list personified. Like even the nice to haves. Like I'm like, my girl checks off all the nice to haves. Oh, wow. And so it was just really crazy. But it's so important that the list came before the girl. Sure. And even when I was dating people before that, I'm like, this person, should I keep dating this person? Like, am I really going to marry her? Like, is this good? Yeah. I could look at the list. because the list don't lie, right? Like the list is looking at me like when you were sober and single and in prayer, this is what you came up with. This person is clearly not 6 of the must-haves that you came up with, right?
Yeah.
And the other side of that too, I think, is that I have to be striving to be that list as well, right? Like I have to be confident yet humble, seeking God in my life, number one of overall things, right? Mature, virtuous. Like you have to be what you're hoping to find, but you have to have that guidance, I think, for yourself and for your significant other, and have an idea of like what that looks like, you know?
Right.
Or else how do you know? And it's so susceptible, I think, emotionally to just saying, well, I'm just going to mold this person or hope that this person will become this abstract idea of what I think I want in the future, and just trying to force it with people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. And it's something to that if you don't know if you don't like have that in mind, at least for yourself, like who you want to be, and who you like, if you're not striving for that, there's even maybe a question there as to whether you're ready to be pursuing any sort of relationship, you know.
Right.
And that's something where I feel like a lot of people, especially people like the teens that I would go into, like I wouldn't discourage them from pursuing relationships, but I encourage them to look deeper. Like, what is it that you're actually looking for? Is that actually what fulfills that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes they get
Not
it.
just they're cute and funny.
Sometimes they don't get it, you know, which is fine.
Right.
But, you know, they're going to learn. They're going to
Sometimes
figure
it
out the
takes
lesson.
some trial and error.
Right. And, you know, I mean, you probably have experience. I've experienced in this, the fact that when I remember having that, reading that book, and I love that book, and I suggested to my teens whenever they asked me for relationship advice, I was like, just read this. And it was great. Awesome. I don't know where my copy is anymore. I think one of my teens still has it, which is kind of sucks because Classic. I love that book. I wrote a lot of notes in that. But I think somewhere in one of my journals, I have my list, but I haven't referred to it since like before even dating Sarah. So if I am to find it, I'm sure though Sarah would check off that and maybe even add more to what I thought.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that I like thought I needed but didn't need, but then also things I do need and didn't think I need. You know.
Absolutely.
So that's
big.
It's huge to be able to have something like that, but know that it's not like if you don't have it and you already started dating, like don't freak out now. Like I'm sure you can still make that understanding with like you can still come to that understanding without having that curated list or, you know, having that. So kind of thinking through if there's some situations that you know that you have issues with in your relationship and there's no shaking that, you know, like then it's so like if you're afraid of breaking that off because of losing someone great, like it's a possible thing, but still like you're wasting your time if you know that is probably not going to be it, and theirs if it's not going to be the one. You know what I mean?
Right. Another thing I want to add in on that, bro, is if you're already dating somebody and you need to make the list. I think a good way to do that is to either make it with a friend of yours, like a virtuous, like good, wise friend, right? Like do it together, or B, make it and have them look over it and think of what they would add or change, right? Because like I'm saying, we're going to be so prone, if you're attached to somebody emotionally, to making the list so that they don't violate it, right? Like so that they're not lacking or missing anything on the list. But I think if you do it with somebody else who's wise and will be honest with you, then you're more likely to do that, you know, to have a more complete picture of what you're looking for.
It's true, and I think to have that list in general, just to kind of like have that. It's a sombering moment, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you will come to that where it's a hard thing to accept that maybe that your significant other doesn't fit that, and like I said, it's more important for you to kind of pray and talk about it. Pray about it, but then actually talk about it as a couple,
right?
And figure that out if you're already dating somebody and just made a list, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you just do it the way you should. What was I gonna add? One thing too, I would add for us, for my standards, it's like you kind of, like we said about my teens, like sometimes it's trial and error. Like there's sometimes you can date somebody and they seem like they fit the bill, like everything on paper sounds right,
Right.
but then it just doesn't work out. And there's no hard feelings on that. Like, yeah, it sucks because on paper it looks great, but the fact still remains that like if it's not, if there's something that is holding it back from being what it can be on paper, then you have to be able to let it go. Sucks, yeah, but it's a beautiful thing to be able to realize, okay, not everything, even if she's like Catholic, she does all these things, it doesn't mean like it's a perfect relationship and it's gonna work out right. There's different layers, again, more layers
like
to
ogres.
it.
Yeah.
Like ogres, so much more
Dating's
layers.
like ogres. It has layers.
It has layers, and it's and yeah, it's a hard thing, and sometimes hearts will get broken. That's inevitable in trying to find sometimes in your
Definitely
search for your loved one, for your wife or husband to be.
Yeah, it's a risk.
It is a risk, but it's a risk that you should be, I guess, willing to take.
Yeah, if you want to be
married. Right.
There's no easy way to do it.
Yeah. So did you find it hard, like trying to mold yourself to that list that you made for yourself? Like,
for myself, I think that's the most important thing. That, like I said a little bit before, like that has to come before it, right? So luckily for me, I felt like the Lord really guided me to that in prayer when I was a freshman in college. I always say that, like, I told a lot of my students this, that I had like a 4-year plan when I got to college, and I created it when I was in college, but I started my freshman year. Freshman year is about deciding who I want to become, and who God is calling me to be. Sophomore year was figuring out how can I become that person, and then junior year was about trying to be that person. And senior year was applying the lessons learned from all my failures junior year, while still in like a training zone, of being in the bubble of college. Yeah. And so luckily, by the time I'm in that last phase, right? I'm a senior in college in SEEK 2015 when I go and get this idea of like creating a list for my significant other. So the list for them was a lot easier to create because I had a list kind of in my head for myself, right? Like I already had an idea of the man that I wanted to become, and had seen some relationships that I was like, I'd like to emulate that. I want my woman to be similar to this woman in this way, or that woman in that way. You hear my hooligans yelling in the background, but it's always madness here, man. But it kind of gave me that concept of like, this is who I want to strive to be, and I knew I just needed to be more of what I was striving to be as a man in my masculinity, and it was just a lot of the same things that I was hoping for, but in well lived out in through the lens of femininity, right? Like through femininity.
Ooh, yeah.
And so that's one of the things, that's one of Emily and I, like one of our favorite things to talk about, especially in talks or podcasts or whatever, is femininity. She loves the feminine genius, and I love talking about masculinity and how complementary those two things can be. And it's one thing that we relished in big time at the beginning of when we would tell other people about the other person, is she would always say, he's just like a man. Like that was like my favorite compliment I've ever received. She would say that to her friends or family when they would ask her to talk about me. And that was how I felt about her. It was like, she's just very, like she's a woman, like she's just very much a woman. Yeah. She's very feminine in like all of the strengths of femininity, right?
Yeah.
And it was just awesome. And so there was a to answer the question though, point blank, there was an unbelievable amount of things I had to change, right? Like I was unbelievably ratchet in high school. Took a lot of that ratchetness to college, had to weed it out, struggled and failed all throughout that for the last 6 years of my life since leaving college. And it's just been, it's been a journey, right? And praise God that I've, by His grace, grown a lot, matured a lot, become more independent, become more confident, become more humble, and all of those things. And so it's been a ton to change, man. But I think that is the most worthwhile fight I've ever done to get to a place where both Emily and myself feel, confident and safe and secure, yet somewhat unworthy and like impressed that we're dating the other person. Like it's a cool place to be in, where it's like, I don't know what she's doing, like it takes to me, but I did enough to get to this point. Praise the Lord. And so, but it's cool when you both feel that way, right? Like you both feel like you're winning, like you're marrying up and stuff. So it's I mean, it's the most worthwhile fight you ever do, because the most important work you'll ever do is being a husband, right? And so that starts, I think you start having the respect for that position when you're 18, when you're 20, right? When you're 16. And you start to mold yourself for that purpose, right? Just like now, you know, like I was in the gym today, you know, you get the whole like shredding for the wedding mindset, right? Like when you start to think about marriage and you're like, this body is actually the other person's, like it's literally going to be hers, you know, like what do I want to present to her? What kind of mind do I want to present to her when she's looking for advice or she needs somebody to listen to? What kind of peacefulness do I want within me when she's having a rough day, right? What kind of person do I want her to be praying with? Like, I'm trying to get her to heaven. Like, we're going to pray together a lot. We're going to spend all this time together. Like, what level of holiness, closeness to God do I want her spouse to have, right? And it's going to be me, and I get to decide that. And I decide all that, as I talked about in this podcast, like, I decide all that today for my wedding next March. Right? Like, I don't decide we're getting married March 19th. I don't decide it's March 12th. Like, oh, crap, I got to catch up on, you know, all these different things. My finances are a mess. My body's a mess. Like, whatever I'm trying to do, like, whatever my vision is for myself, like, I can't do it in 5 days, right? Like, luckily, I have time. We have time, right? And then you still have, even if you're behind, I can say, well, what about next year? You know, what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What kind of man do I want her to be married to? This is the love of my life, right? This is the person I care the most about in the world. Like, and if you do care, then you take care of, you know, you pursue those things. You pursue virtue and holiness, and let go of the things of the world and the things of, you know, of the flesh and all these desires and stuff that are holding you back from being your best for the sake of that person.
Right. It's like, I want to add, like, just kind of adding to that, the time that you have, guys, gentlemen who are single, ladies too, but gentlemen in particular, that time frame where you're single, man, and you're just kind of, you know, whether you're searching or not, like, cherish those times to really work on this, you know, like, figure out what it is, you know, take it through prayer, figure that out, and then actually take some action towards it. Like, whether it be physical fitness, like you want to get better, healthier, you want to have a better sleeping like schedule, you want to just be more control of your time and stuff like that, whatever that is, like if you want to eat healthy, I don't know, whatever it is, if you want to be praying more, you want to spend more time in adoration, or, you know, doing more things for your soul, like, do that, make some time for that, and really work on that, so that when it comes to that time, like, of getting, like, pursuing someone, that you don't have to, like, you know, put up facades. It's who you are. You know what I mean? It's sometimes we're, you know, guys at our age, or, you know, in our our age, are just trying to put on fronts about who they are to impress either other guys or women. You know, sometimes, whether it be they're Catholic or not, there's just facades, like, oh yeah, I remember I was in a Catholic college. You know, I know guys who were going to adoration with these girls just because it was with these girls, not because it was adoration. Right, you know? Yeah. So, like, I see that. I've seen it. And, like, I know there's still more growth there. I've done it. I did it. You know what I mean? Like, I would go to mass just because I know the girl was going to a certain mass. You know what I mean? Or like, maybe not like to that extent, but you know what I mean? Like, there's things that I did to make myself look better than I was.
Just externally motivated than internally motivated.
Yeah. And it can still, God can do work with whatever that is. But, you know, it still is, like, be motivated for the right reasons, and let that, you know, let your heart be changed, so that when it comes to that time, you're not doing things externally, you know. Right. You're doing it because you have that innate desire for it, you know. And it's a beautiful thing that you can see who you can become in that time. I have a friend right now who is now a father, soon to be a father of two. And he's a bigger set guy like me, but a little bit heavier and taller. And I saw him this past weekend, and we went to go play some golf. And the man, like, look half the size that he was when I last saw him. And I was like, dude, what's up? Like, you're losing a lot of weight. What's up? You, like, looks great. And I was like, dude, like, thanks, man. Like, you know, I've just been walking every day. I've been walking a couple miles here like every day or, more. And he said it was all in sense to make sure that he can be there for his kids in the future. His health no longer is a joke. It's not like something in the part. Like it always has been important to him. And he's, he and I, when we met, we're going through our phases of being on a good health kick, and then we slip and fall, and then we're like back into our normal bad habits, and then so on and so forth. Kind of cycles, I mean, we all do. But he's like, no, now it's like, it's not just going to be a cycle. It's going to be strong. And I've been going for so long. I'm going to keep going because it's not just for me anymore. And it's for my wife and it's for my kids.
Yep.
And he has found that, in the opposite sense of like, there's external motivation now, but he knows that that's also a part of his motivation in general. To make those changes, and it was like a beautiful thing to see. So like, whatever that is, if you do some digging, I'm sure you'll find some good stuff to change that you'll be happy that you changed before, maybe after you're married. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many things I think that could apply to, how many guys do the same thing with their spiritual lives, right? And get all types out of spiritual shape, or like I said earlier too, about finances, and just like can be just a hot mess financially because they don't take the time to budget or get disciplined or learn, educate themselves on how can I actually be a good steward and provider for my family, and contribute to that at least, And so, there's so many things. I think that a lot of it just takes courage and discipline, right? Like two traditionally masculine virtues. And I think that we don't like to recognize that, right? Because you have football players and soldiers and all the typical tough guys, right, who won't pray in public, or they won't, sit down to take a finances class or read a book on it. They won't, or you have people who will do those two things but won't go to the gym on a regular basis or cut out certain aspects of their diet, right? You have people who, whatever it might be, right? Like there's all these things that they kind of like. Everybody has like their fear point, right? And that's why I love the 7 pillars. But thinking about that, like you just have to be courageous and disciplined and actually like take these things on, and not just be, Emily and I just read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, and I read another book called Range, which talks about grit, and he talks about how like the one thing that's kind of misleading is that a lot of us are really gritty in one area of life, but really not gritty in other areas. And like you want to be the type of person who's gritty in whatever you have to do, right? Like you're willing to do those things, and you're willing to overcome that fear of praying in front of your significant other or going to confession or whatever it might be, so that you can be who you're supposed to be, right? Like so that you can live out your life without fear. Like fear is not enjoyable in any way, right? Like I've been afraid of public speaking. I've been afraid of praying in front of people. I've been afraid of jumping out of an airplane. I've been afraid of asking a girl out, right? Like I've had all kinds of fears in my life, and I know that none of them are pleasant, right? Like it's never enjoyable. It's never fun, and I don't want to experience it. One of my favorite things about my dad growing up, he was a nut. He's a nutcase in general, but one of my favorite things about him is he just always he was a tough dude from the inner city. He'd just be like, I'm not afraid of anything, and he would tell me that all the time. And I grew to believe him. I don't know if it's true or not, but I still believe to this day that my dad's not afraid of anything. And I could think of some deeper, more things like being afraid of change and certain things like that I could say that maybe he's shied away from it in times in his life. But physically, he claims to not be afraid of anything. But that's really what I hope to be. You know what I mean? Like except for like the fear of the Lord and the fear of messing that up. My relationship with God and my relationship with my spouse in a certain way that can drive me to be my best every day, to live a life without fear. And just have the courage to like take on these issues and start to like actually handle the things. You're addicted to pornography. Okay, well, like do something about that. Right. Like stop being afraid of it. Like stop being afraid to tell somebody. Like get the help that you need. Like whatever it is. Like just do it. Like do it today. Right. Like don't wait. Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's big, man.
It's huge, and there's so much. There is so much that we can do to improve, and I think the important thing is to have mercy on yourself in the progress, like it can be easy to be like, oh, I need to do this, and this. But you in this progress of growth and this time of growth, you have time, bro. You got all the time you need, right? Don't try to rush it, and don't try to don't give yourself a deadline. Don't do that. Like, just kind of work through it at your pace. Give yourself mercy, but continue to move forward. Like, stumbling, falling forward is still going forward. That's all you got to do.
Right.
Even if you're trip 2
forward. Steps forward, 1 step back,
Right.
I think the only time you really need to kick your own ass and get, and be really hard on yourself is if you're doing nothing. That's
right.
that's the only time that I'm willing to choose somebody out is
right.
if you're doing doing nothing is never okay. Right. At least trying and failing, we can accept, and you should be graceful and all and gracious with yourself, and you have to be patient with yourself because you're gonna fail. I failed unbelievable amount of times, right? Unfathomable how many times I would go on to fail in everything I tried to change, right? From anger to lust to all that stuff, and you have to be patient. But I was like, I'm never going to be so soft that I will not go back to confession. Mm-hmm. I will never be so soft that I won't go back to mass on Sunday. I'm just never going to do that. That was you have to draw your line. You have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, right? If all of your values, of your beliefs, and all these things, that just wasn't okay with me. I just wasn't. That was kind of where I had to draw the line. I think that's where every man has to, every woman and man, every Catholic has to draw the line at those two things, so that you can continue to fight forward and you continue to go. I love David Goggins. He's a big Navy SEAL. He's an unbelievable. He's just crazy, right? He's insanity embodied. But I was just listening to this video the other day. He curses a ton. I always tell people that's my disclaimer for him if you're gonna listen to him. But he was on a jog. He runs 20 miles a day. He said, and he's like, gosh. I was, he's like, I was thinking about it too long, and I was being really soft, and I was being a little bitch and all this stuff. And he's like, so you know what I did? This man's crazy. He said, I recorded myself. Giving all my excuses, all my pains, all my complaining, right? And he's like, and I listened to it. And he's like, and I sound like a little TCH. And he's like, you know what I did? I got my shoes on, and I got out my door, and I went running in the rain or whatever he went to do that day. And I think that people literally need to the reason why I listen to those people is that we need that in the church sometimes, right? It drives me insane. I have zero patience or compassion for grown adults who tell me I'm not going back to confession because I'm afraid of what the priest will say, or I'm afraid of this or that. I have no none, no compassion for it. It's do you realize there are people who run into burning buildings? There are people who, run towards gunfire for you. Jesus died on the cross. Right. St. Maximilian Kolbe was literally in Auschwitz, and you can't go back to confession because you're afraid the priest might look at you funny. Even if you had a really bad confession experience, I still don't go back. Who cares? It couldn't have been that bad. Nobody punches people in the face. You're not gonna lose an arm. It's you might get your feelings hurt, and you did something. You hurt God's feelings. If anything, you'll experience maybe half the pain that you caused Jesus on the cross. Not even half. Half the emotional pain your sins might have caused him, right? 1/1000th of the pain that you caused Jesus on the cross, you might have to endure for the sake of confession, so that he can forgive your sins. Jesus is literally on the cross calling you back to confession, and you're like, but what if he's mean? And it's and you somehow compute that in your mind, and it comes out equal. It makes sense to you. I don't get it. But you have to go. You have to just just try. You fail and all that stuff. My whole vibe changes, right? You're trying and you fail, a whole vibe changes. You come to me looking for guidance or advice, and you're like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm not meeting with you again. I don't have any desire to talk to you in ways that we can help you get better if you're not going to change next time we meet together, right? There's got to be some effort.
Right.
Anyways,
there's got to be a moment. I mean, again, of living ardently, of seeking excellence. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep trying. Terms. Right, good terms, good things to say. Well, we got more with living ardently and seeking excellence after this break, but we'll be back. So stay tuned. We got some more for you guys. If you did not know, Living Ardently is now an affiliate with Be a Heart Design. Be a Heart has a bunch of great things for you and your family. So if you want to go get something, use our affiliate link in our show notes, and then you can use our promo code Ardently10 for 10% off your purchase. Everything that we make goes straight back into our podcast, so you'll be supporting our ministry. Again, so if you want to get something nice for yourself, for your friends, or your family, go to Be a Heart using our affiliate link. Use our promo code Ardently10 for 10% off. And not only will you be helping the ministry here at Living Ardently, but you'll be getting something cool too. Again,
Link in the show notes, Ardently 10. Let's get back to it.
So we're back with my boy Nathan Crankfield from Seeking Excellence. I think he's over there on my screen. He's over there. So what's up, dude? How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Just happy to be here.
Yeah. Make sure you follow his Instagram accounts. Again, it's Seeking 365 for Seeking Excellence, and then his personal at ncrank 23. There's all in the show notes below if you haven't already. I'll also add some of the show notes, some things that we talked about in today's episode, like the book by Sarah Swafford, Emotional Virtue, and maybe some other stuff. Maybe that talk from the guy you just mentioned.
Goggins,
yeah. You had to send me a link.
It's only 60 seconds, man. It'll get you moving.
Yeah, that was amazing. All right. So, for the latter half of these episodes, I always love to kind of give some good, like to kind of continue the conversation, but also have some questions that might be helpful for people to take back to them, to their own lives. So just kind of continuing what we had before, how, I know as we get older, sometimes, we probably had this idea of dating as a kid, and then we grew up as a teen, and so on and so forth. As now as a man, as Catholic men especially, how has that changed? Like the idea of dating and idea of marriage and understanding of it. How has that changed over the years for you?
Yeah. So when I was really young, I just didn't understand at all about dating and what the purpose of it was. It wasn't something my parents covered, my school really went through. And so eventually I just came to understand like the reason why you date is for the sake of getting married. And I think that a lot of people in the world don't get this. Yeah. And that could be a whole spiel in and of itself of how we've lost the idea of what marriage is in society. And but within the church, it's really sad to see people not get it, and people who claim to be Catholic not understand that. The whole reason, why else are you dating somebody, right? Like the world tells you you're dating so you can have somebody to hook up with and cuddle with and watch Netflix with and chill. And it's like, no, like the reason why you're dating is so you can find your spouse, right? Because like I said earlier, like your spouse, that vocation is the most important work we are going to do in our lives, right? And so I think that that's the purpose of dating. I think that I've learned that the perfect purpose of marriage, as I said earlier too, I alluded to a little bit, is to get your spouse to heaven, right? And so that's the primary goal. And then the secondary purpose is to, procreate with God and create children and raise those children in a godly home, showing them how you love your spouse and loving them and forming them into adults, right? And so I think that those two are the most important things. Emily's really been a powerful force in my life in understanding family and marriage in such a deeper way. Her love for theology of the body, her love for family and marriage and things like that, and studying that in college has been huge for me. Just really understanding. Before, because of my love for evangelization, I really felt like it was kind of like a tie between like evangelizing ministry and all that kind of stuff that I do and marriage and my family. And she just completely like rocked my world with a bunch of logic and facts and church fathers and wise people who say that that's not the case, that the best work that I will do as a man in this world is to love her well and to lead her and my family and love my family well. That's the purpose.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the weird thing is, I think I had a pretty, not that my parents gave me a good understanding, like by definition of a good family, but I think it was just TV. Like I remember thinking like all these families in these shows like were bad families. Like there's only like like they're like Homer's, like the Simpsons were dumb. Zach and Cody was a broken family. Like, and like there's just every depiction of the family that I saw I knew wasn't the right depiction of a family for some reason. I don't know what it was. Yeah. And then like I always hated TV for that because there was never like, I don't know, like after like the 50s, 60s era, like sitcom TV shows just made the parents and like, I don't know, just made the parents and family weird. Oh no, Full House was the ones like, even though they don't have their mom or because of some reason, like this is a great family dynamic, even though they have some silly people in it, you know?
Sure.
Like this
Mine
was like
the Banks. The
Banks, yes, that was two. And
Rest
I mean,
in peace, Uncle Phil.
Uncle Phil, yes.
First things first.
Yeah, that was. I mean, well, how come he don't want me, man? Oh man,
Deep.
that episode.
Yeah,
bro, that was my like. Full House and Fresh
Gotta
Prince, like that was for me. That was it. But that, like even then, like those broken, they were like, especially Fresh Prince, like it was a broken family, but they had a good,
Wills, yeah.
A good father figure in Uncle Phil.
Absolutely.
And that was probably one of the first times I saw a good father figure in TV.
Yeah.
For
sure.
And maybe one of the only times you kind of see that. I mean, Danny Turner, those two shows. And, kind of growing up, I just kind of learned, the theology behind it. And it all made sense. Like, oh, yeah, like you have to love your wife and love your family and get them to heaven.
Right.
And so I don't know when the connect happened. I'm guessing just when I went to college and had the theology instilled in me, but I always had that understanding of family. Despite how I acted, family always was so precious in my mind. My favorite show right now is This Is Us, and they show a really great dynamic of family. And they make you cry probably like every episode.
Wow.
So if you want to watch something that's like a really
I've never
great,
seen it. My mom loves it though.
Interesting. It's interesting because like it definitely shows the family in such a positive light, which is not common, like I said.
Sure.
And it's also like fatherhood in particular that's shed in a very positive light.
Wow.
Which isn't, again, common. So if you want to show on a good family, I would suggest This Is Us. But yeah, that's kind of how, for me, it changed over the years. So maybe thinking about that for you guys who are out there and thinking about where your understanding of your family is, whether it's been affected by your family or your things that you've seen in the past or families you've seen in the past. There's always maybe thinking about that could be helpful for you in some way. Just kind of seeing how you want to be as a father, your role in a relationship and stuff like that could be helpful. Following up here, we have another question that was really great. What would you like? When you're dating as a 21-year-old, what would your advice be to them, to yourself as a 21-year-old? Was it maybe still in college, fresh out of college?
No, I graduated at 21. So yeah, that was like my senior year of college. I think my main thing that I think I still needed to hear at 21, I think that I committed to trying to live chastity when I was 18 or 9. I was 18. But was just still really struggling. Had very long, periods of success and would fall. And I think that the one thing that I need to know at 21 that 27-year-old me could teach 21-year-old me is that chastity was worth it. Like I think I always say there's a difference between intellectual conversions and interior or like conversions of heart, Yeah. And intellectually at 18, like I got it about chastity. Like I was like, scripture, like I believe in scripture. I believe in Jesus, like Jesus in scripture says that lust is bad. Like noted, right? Like I was like, I at least got to try this, and I was like getting it and kind of and all this stuff. But I really didn't understand that it was worth it. It was worth the sacrifice. It was worth the wait, and all of those things. And so I think that was probably the big one. And then the other one I would say is just like stick to the list, bro.
Nice.
What we talked about earlier. Like I made the list and like so many times and coming back from deployment, different periods of my life that I just made a lot of exceptions and didn't really like stick and hold out for that. And like really believe that God would lead me to somebody who would, fulfill those desires I feel like he placed in my heart. And so trusting in that too would be really big. Like stick to the list and chastity is worth it. That would be my 2 things.
Those are big. Mine would be just to take more time. He's like, slow down, pace yourself.
You're only 21.
You're only 21. You got a lot of time. 25 ain't old. You ain't going to have a family at 25, promise you. Just because everybody around you at Ave is getting engaged and getting married right away, don't mean you got to do the same thing. And it ain't over until the fat lady sings. So, I mean, you got time. That's all I gotta say.
In conclusion,
you got time.
I tiempo. That's funny.
And then we got like 2 really good questions I really wanted to kind of dive into, but we got a little time left before we have to cut it off here, but let's try to dive in. So one thing, I mean, just for us, you're engaged. like at this point of the this release at this point of the recording, I'm not married yet,
right.
but I'm in like days away, spitting distance. What are you most excited about marriage?
I would say what I'm most excited for is probably, I'm very excited to live with Emily. That's probably the most thing I'm most excited for. I think she's been so funny since we got engaged. Like, we have pretty hard like curfews on evenings. It just helps with chastity and you know, just all types of things. And she gets grumpy if she's up late because she's definitely a morning person. I'm more of a night person. But she usually will try to leave. You know, she starts to be like 8 o'clock, 8:30. You know, 9 o'clock typically on weeknights is it. Yeah. But since we got engaged, she's like 10. Like, she doesn't want to leave. Like, she's just like, I just hate leaving you. You know, I was like, it will be really awesome to just like get to, you know, be together so much more. Like, I just really love being with her. And you know, when you get to that point when you're engaged, like the person's your best friend. You know, and like you just want to. It makes it so much more special. Like, it doesn't make me have any desire to move in together when we move to Denver or anything like that. Because like, it's just kind of like you want to do it the right way because you know that it's worth it, right? Everything I just said about chastity, like, it's worth it to do it right. But when you do it right and when it happens, it's going to be amazing. You know, like I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel the same. Like, it's since Sarah and I live about an hour and a half away from each other, it's always so hard, you know, with distance and trying to find ways to see each other.
That is tough.
And it is hard. But yeah, definitely excited to not have to worry about, you know, driving and to see each other and just going out, you know, just turning over and seeing her. It would be great, you know.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. So I'm excited, and also to like be done with wedding prep, all this wedding planning stuff. It's stress, bro. It's crazy.
Just for the wedding to be.
I love it at first, but everything just like all the details just start. Like,
I'm already at that point. Yeah, and I'm like 8 days in.
Like 8 days in. You got a whole like a year, bro.
11 more months of this, man.
11 months. I'm praying for you.
Hanging on by a thread.
11 days in. 8 days in. I'm dead.
I'm dying.
Yeah.
Price tags add up.
Yeah, price tag, man. I tell you, Etsy. Just look at Etsy. It's actually a lot cheaper than everything else.
Etsy's the move.
Etsy is definitely the move. If you're prepping for a wedding, like that's the move. Etsy.
That's right. That's so funny.
Right. Speaking of advice, what is your last advice for somebody who's looking for the one, who is out there, for guys out there who might be still searching?
Yeah, it's so good. I think we've covered a lot of that, you know, and so I really just kind of want to, I think the best thing to do is kind of summarize some of the stuff we've shared already. But I think the best thing you can do in looking for the one is, I think you have to take action. That's a big thing, right? Like, I think that sometimes the woman will play a little bit of offense too, which is helpful. But too many times, I think for both men and women, I think we just become too passive. And we get into this place of like, I think the message so often today is to, and there's truth and goodness to this, to like be patient and content in your singleness. That people get like almost too patient and content in their singleness because they're not doing anything, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to try some, right? Like, it's not gonna it doesn't just happen, you know. Like, there has to be some effort, right? Like, I had to have that awkward conversation with her at the end of the Zoom call, or drive out, you know, to Kansas to see her and take her out and do all these things, right? Like, there's action that has to be done, right? Like, you have to think about it, you have to pray about it and pray for it,
right?
But I think some of the best things that people can do when you're looking for the one is to just like, I'm really passionate about like entering into your masculinity and your femininity and trying to live that out the best that you can, and live sainthood out the best that you can through masculinity or femininity, depending on if you're a man or a woman, you know. But I did one of my favorite podcasts I've recorded for SE is about the biggest problem with men today, and we talk about effeminacy. And just like avoiding that in your life, right? Like if you're a man, like be a man, like, and be a great man, be a good, virtuous, holy, awesome man. And that podcast lists out what I think that looks like. It's one of that's going to be a series, but thinking about that, like try to be a man, take action, be a woman, be present and aware and think about these things, because so many people I think are single that don't need to be. And I think that Catholic dating culture, probably at Ave, just like it is at BC, gets toxic quick. Because there's just so much weirdness to it, coming from a more secular background, like with dating, I'm like super weirded out by how weird Catholic dating can be. I'm like, I figured it would be like secular dating, but without the unchaste things, and it's not. Like there's like some good fun aspects of secular dating that are good that don't exist in the Catholic dating world.
It's true.
There's a lot of awkwardness between men and women, and it just like doesn't need to be there. So like, stop being weird. That's another bit of advice.
I echo everything, especially the last part.
Randoms, like get your hair cut. Go just like dress normally. I don't like. There's so many things you could do.
Right.
So that's it. That'll wrap it up there.
I echo that. Let's get your haircut. Make a presence. Don't make it too much. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I think the same thing I said to my 21-year-old self is, man, y'all take your time, man. Like enjoy that singleness, because it's never, once you're married, bro. That's it. Like you'll never be alone again.
It's gone.
It's gone. It's with somebody always. And that's how marriage should be. And so if you're searching, like, and you're like frustrated, like, dude, take your time, miss, take your time. Like you're going to have somebody, if the Lord wills it, you'll have somebody, and you'll have them for the rest of your life.
Right.
Rest of your life. Like that's like 50, maybe hopefully 70 years. You know what I mean? Like you got time to be alone. Be alone, enjoy it, be single, enjoy it, enjoy time with your friends. Like, because once you're married, like, that's it. Like, I can't, like, that is it.
Right.
That's one of the best advice I got as a single guy, was to enjoy your singleness. And I didn't know what that meant until, like, I moved to where I live now. Kind of experiencing like being as a man alone in like not with family in areas, since I started at the parish before, the parish I used to work at, like I was a man by myself and I had to learn to be that, and it was great. So whoever you are, if you're still searching, just enjoy your time, and it happens when it happens.
Amen.
So that's all I got.
I love
Anything else to add there?
No, I think that's great, man. Use that time, I think, to lay the foundation of who you want to be, and continue to seek that out, because it's the best time to do that, for sure.
So true. Hey, y'all, thanks for listening. Again, if you want to follow Nathan, you can follow him at Seeking365 or at ncrank23. All of that's in the show notes. Follow myself at It's Only Adrienne. Follow the podcast Living Ardently at Living Ardently. Send us an email at livingardentlypod@gmail.com. Follow us. Subscribe on YouTube, so you can watch all these podcasts, like our Zoom calls, practically, if you want to watch that. But if you're not, if you're listening, see our haircuts. I mean, I need one, but I'm waiting till the wedding. Nathan just got a nice fresh one. He didn't get pushed back. You didn't turn your head. You got to turn your head a little bit.
The clean fade.
Yeah, there you go.
Extra
and that clean stubble too.
Right.
So check us out on YouTube. If not, if you're listening on the podcast, wherever you're listening, make sure you're subscribing and following, especially on Apple Podcasts. If you can leave us a rating and review, that helps the podcast excel and get to more people. And that's really all I got. Give us a call if you want to to talk or converse with me. 407-853-2010. I'm always here for text or a call. I might not always answer, but I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But appreciate you guys listening. Love you all. And hope this helped in some way, shape, or form, whether you're a guy or a girl. But particularly the guys there. So, got anything last thing to say?
That's it, man. Go out and continue to fight hard to be your best.
Yeah. Go listen to if you didn't listen to the episode that we did on his podcast, go check that out now. Otherwise, until next time, keep living ardently. Peace.